Hello and welcome to Wheels Boy. We've already brought you a review of the very handsome and China market only Lamando L sedan from Volkswagen. But if the L in Lamando L stands for long, what would happen if they made a Lamando W where that W stood for wide? It would probably look a little bit like this. Today, we are going to drive this Photoshop come to life.
With hands-on test drives and reviews of exciting Chinese market vehicles, Wheelsboy is the #1 source for China auto insights. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook.
This beautiful creation is a product of Garage, a Chinese media. They decided to take Volkswagen at their word. When the first generation of Volkswagen Lamando debuted, Volkswagen described it as having kind of a wide-bodied interior for a sedan. But the thing is, customers didn't feel it was especially wide. That's why decided, hey, if Volkswagen's not going to give the people the wide-body sedan that they want, then we'll do it for them. The result is something that looks like someone highlighted the front of a Lamando L and then put Control-V, 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 Control-V until it was nearly 3 meters in length if you include the side view mirrors. This was accomplished, I'm told, pretty simply. They cut a Lamando L in half, and then they put more metal in between the pieces. As you can see, they've tried to mimic the original styling of the car. This black strip, originally the Lamando L had a LED light strip here, but that's really hard to stretch, so they just kind of replaced it with a black piece. And this, I'm assuming, kind of helps to cover up the seam between the pieces of metal. I will say here, where they made the cuts and welded together, actually quite nice. Very hard to tell. Down here on the bottom, they also created an air intake to mimic the original one on the Lamando L. That's a 20-footer, I would say. From 20 feet away, looks pretty good. Up close, yeah, you can tell that's not original. Not much to talk about when it comes to the side of the car because it looks exactly the same as a standard Lamando L. But when you get to the back, well, it's just as wide as the front. As you can see, the taillight here, they've had to fill in a gap using this plastic piece. These taillights, in order to replicate it or to make a long one like this, would be very expensive, so I understand why they did this. The glass as well, here and all around the car, at least this one, the one on the top and the front windshield, it's actually acrylic, not real glass. Anyone who's ever tried to have a project car and get custom glass made will know that a piece of glass like this costs more than you can possibly imagine. So I'm going to give them a pass on using the acrylic. And the bumper, I've never seen a spray-on bumper before, but hey, looks good in pictures and that's what matters. This trunk actually can be opened. However, it's incredibly heavy. It's so heavy. Oh God. All right, this is gonna have to do. Oh, this is what it takes to lift the trunk lid of the Lamando W. Almost.
Higher.
Go.
Yes, sir.
Thank you to that guy from Garage for helping me to open the back of this thing. It's just so freaking heavy, but it's worth it. Look at the space inside of this thing. This was a liftback, just like the Lamando L, but it is, again, like 2.8 meters wide on the inside. I think you could fit like 4 or 5 people in here. It's awesome. They had to get pretty clever in order to fill the space that they've made on the inside of this wide-body Lamando L. Starting with this huge screen here, which, if I turn the car on... Uh-oh, hold on. Let me turn off. There's like 500 error messages, unsurprisingly, that you have to cancel every time, ranging from the seat belts to the parking sensors to the self-driving system. There goes another one. I think I'm all done. We'll see. Anyways, here in the center, you have this giant screen. I think this might be bigger than the 27-inch screen in the Ford Evos and Mondeo and the Lincoln Zephyr, but I'm not sure. One thing this has that a Lincoln Zephyr and a Ford Evos do not have are or rather is, a mouse. This is basically a desktop screen that they've put on here, but it's probably better than just having a plain piece of dashboard here, I suppose. The dashboard, speaking of which, is covered in this kind of Alcantara material, but if you feel right here, you can feel the seam where they put the two pieces of dashboard together for sure. This side of the car, basically from the cut line in this silver plastic and this screen here, over to the left is all original Lamando L interior. And surprisingly, despite the tons of warning messages that I pointed out before, most of the things still work. The air conditioning still works, for example. Obviously, the DSG, I believe it's a 7-speed DSG transmission, it still works fine. The screen, well, when you hit the menu button, in addition to getting a bunch of error messages, the reverse camera turns on. And when you put the car in drive, which I learned later, it also comes on. Over here, they've decided to fill the space on the right side of the car by putting a row of seats from, I'm told, like a cargo van in here. The style doesn't quite match up, and I would guess they're probably not as comfortable as the Volkswagen seats. Of course, you've also got a third screen down there at the end, which, to me, is pretty useless. I can't even begin to reach it. All right, let's find out whether the hood of this car is as hard to open as the back. Okay. You have no idea where everything's going to be. It's so wide. Oh, actually, not that bad. Oh, wow. Okay, this is the same 1.4 liter turbocharged four-cylinder you had in the original Lamando L, but everything is on the right side of the car. This, as you can see, is pretty much completely open, except for this brace that I'm sure is here to keep this car from falling apart completely. Ah, this is kind of fantastic. This reminds me of those like really old cars, like 1930s Fords, where you could stand inside the engine bay and work on the engine. Very convenient. The back seat here, well, they've done a much better job of integrating the non-original parts with the original seats. As you can see, they've matched the red stitching here on the new parts of the seat with the original Volkswagen seats, though the leather color isn't exactly the same. I am going to say, though, looks much better than this weird row of cargo van seats in the front. Let me sit here in the middle. Definitely not as comfortable as the Volkswagen seats, but impressively integrated. And we talk a lot about knee or leg room in cars and a lot about headroom, but we don't always talk about shoulder space. I would argue that this car has the best shoulder space of any vehicle I have ever seen. Every time you start this car, this is a good start to the track session. Every time you put this car into drive, the parking sensor error comes up, which I suppose isn't very surprising because they probably removed the parking sensors from this car. I've been given express instructions not to exceed 30 kilometers per hour. Honestly, that's pretty impressive. I was expecting 20 kilometers per hour. But it does give you at least a sense of what it is what it's like to drive a car this wide. It's so disconcerting because you throw it into a corner like this one, for example, and if you just look here, you think, oh, this is a normal car. And then you turn your head a little bit and the dashboard keeps going and going and going, and then you remember that this thing is 2 meters wide or more than 2 meters wide or whatever. This is absolutely ridiculous. This makes the least sense of any car I've ever driven, and I love it. A couple of things to point out that have kind of gone wrong. Again, not surprising. The parking sensors I mentioned don't work, which that's fine. When you put the car in drive, though, for some reason, the backup camera turns on automatically. So I'm currently watching the backup camera go and seeing what's behind me, which is super useful, I guess, if I was in a race with different classes of cars. Thankfully, in this case, I'm not. It's just me on this racetrack going 26 kilometers per hour. I don't think I've ever had to pray on camera, but this might be the time because I'm going to throw it into this corner at 31 kilometers per hour. There's so many noises. NVH has definitely not improved. Turns out jamming a bunch of metal in here probably doesn't have sound deadening, does not make for a better driving experience, but that's not particularly surprising, I guess. The wind noise, even at 31 kilometers per hour, is pretty impressive because this acrylic glass all around is not well sealed, shall we say. Aerodynamics are not as efficient as the original car, so definitely can hear the wind. Tire sound's okay, but what I'm really scared of is every time it makes a noise that I can't immediately identify, I think it's splitting in half. It's finally gonna split in half. This car definitely can't be driven on the road here in China. It doesn't have a plate, it's not registered, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine that they did not give me this to try and negotiate through traffic. That would have been an absolute, oh no, here we go. Oh God. Every time I take a turn, it's butt puckering. Oh, this is the tightest turn on the track. Oh no. Oh. Again, I hear a creak and I'm just like, it's over. It's over. I've destroyed their project car that they spent months making. I gotta say, this is probably the first time I've ever driven a car that looks like one of those optical illusions that you would have played with when you were a kid. It's completely disconcerting to look at, but also fantastic. Thanks to Yiche Garage for giving us a chance to check out this car, and thanks to you for watching today's video. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and our new website. All the links are in the description below. And as always, like, subscribe, and hit the bell.